Imagine a moment. You enter your room. It's dark. Instinctively, without thinking about it, you push the switch to light the room. You don't even think about it. That's one example of the power of habits in action. At the end of this video, you'll find a clear and scientifically proven method to get you into any good habits and out of bad habits. It's based on the 4 laws of behavior change developed by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits. In a previous video, I discussed basic elements that determine these 4 laws of habit formation. You could watch a video if you haven't already, but there is one crucial element that you must have in mind to fully understand this one. It says this: you must always start from identity to habits and not the other way around. Concretely, you must first conceive yourself as a reader, the identity, and then prove it to yourself through good reading habits. You can't fight what you are, so don't decide to learn code. Decide to be a programmer first and develop habits to prove it to yourself. And that's when the 4 laws have the maximum effect. So, what do they consist of? The cycle of setting up a habit, whatever it might be, begins with a signal. A trigger which, when abused, creates the desire, the will to give a response, which might be an action or a thought. With a sufficiently strong will, the response follows and leads to a reward, whether immediate or distant. The reward or the result contributes to better associating the trigger to the result, and the cycle starts again if the answer is satisfactory. It is indeed because you have had the reward of light that your brain has associated the following 3 elements. I enter my room. I am in complete darkness. I press the switch. I have light. This is why, in order to facilitate and create lasting habits, we must make the signal obvious, make the action attractive, make it easy to perform the action, and make the reward satisfying. These are the 4 laws of habit acquisition developed by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits. First law, make the signal obvious. To make the signal of a habit obvious, we need to know precisely where and when to take action. Scientific studies have shown that when it comes to taking action, the big difference between people lies in the precision of the answer to the question, where and when should I do it? The more clearly you can answer that question, the greater the likelihood that the action will occur. The second thing to make the signal obvious consists of preparing the environment. Maybe you don't read because you don't have a book at hand. Maybe you don't fall asleep early because your bed isn't just only for sleeping. Maybe you text or watch movies on it. Maybe you don't drink enough water a day because you don't have water nearby all the time. Maybe you consume all your time with television because you do have one in every room of your house. Maybe you gain weight because you only have junk food in your kitchen. As you can see, it is crucial for the survival of habits to associate our action with places, prepared places. In one experiment, scientists changed the eating habits of patients and visitors in a hospital cafeteria simply by changing the place of objects. They wanted patients and visitors to drink more water than soda or other drinks. So the researchers increased the number of water stands and put the other beverages a bit far back in the cafeteria. Surprising as it might seem, no one noticed that their eating habits had changed. Doing so is not only good for creating good habits, it also allows us to abandon bad ones. In this case, we need to make the cue non-obvious, as the researchers did in the previous example, moving the drink stands to the back of the cafeteria. The third thing to make the signal obvious is practicing stacking habits. Someone who would like to learn a language for an hour a day could say this if he already had the good habit of taking a shower in the mornings. I practice German for an hour every morning right after my shower. In his mind, then, taking a shower in the morning will be the beginning of learning German. This is for the same reason that you can guess the next song on your playlist just by hearing the end of the previous song. Stacking habit thus gradually links habits together to create a system, a net, in which habits depend on each other. So in summary, for this first part, to make the signal obvious, we must first situate the habit in time and space, meaning know precisely the time and the place we want to take action. Then practice stacking habits. I wash my plate right after I eat. I make my bed right after I wake up. Finally, we can try to prepare our environment to associate each habit with a piece of space. My bed is only for sleeping, for example, or I study on this table and do nothing else there. Let's then move to the second law. Make the action attractive. Scientists have shown that dopamine, the hormone that fuels action, is released in our brain not only when we have a reward, but also when we anticipate a reward. Therefore, to make a habit appealing, we can associate it with something we enjoy doing. For example, if you want to chat with friends, but you need to get some work done, you can stack these two habits by saying, when I finish my work, I chat for 5 minutes. Another way to make an action attractive is to use our thirst for belonging. A study of 12,000 people over 32 years showed that your chances of becoming obese, if you have a close friend who becomes obese, increases by 57%. The same conclusion, but in the other direction, was wrong. In a relationship, if one partner loses weight, the other will also lose weight in 1 out of 3 cases. James Clear says it so well. Our hunger to belong can be an advantage when it is tamed and directed toward belonging to groups that reflect who we really want to be. If you want to learn German, for example, and make it attractive to learn, find people with the same culture as you. In summary, to make the action appealing, James explains in Atomic Habit that you can stack the habit with something you'd like to do. You can also join people who have the same culture, who want to accomplish the same thing. The third law now, make it easy. When we take a look at our lives, we can see that we're more likely to do things that require less friction, less effort, than things that require more. For example, it is easy to scroll the screens of our phones because actually it is easy to do it and requires a small amount of energy. With this conception in mind, we must understand that habits that are difficult to do are labeled as such because they require a lot of effort. The idea then is to minimize the amount of effort invested in implementing a habit. This brings us to the first element of this law: practice the 2 minutes rule. The 2 minutes rule means doing the simplest version of the new habit in 2 minutes at first and staying consistent with the 2 minutes for a long period of time. Those 2 minutes of effortless action can, after enough practice time, lead to more and more work, always triggered by the 2 minutes in the beginning. James Clear puts it better. People often think that it is weird to get hyped about reading one page or meditating for 1 minute or making one sales call. But the point is not do one thing. The point is to master the habit of showing up. The truth is, a habit must be established before it can be improved. If you can't learn the basic skill of showing up, then you have little hope of mastering the finer details. You have to standardize before you can optimize. The second crucial element for the third law is repetition. A teacher every year at the beginning of his photography class always performs an experiment that always gives the same result. He divides his class into two groups. To the first group, he asks to take as many pictures as possible because each member in that group will be graded according to the number of pictures he has taken. On the other side, he asks members to bring back one photo, each of which will be graded for its perfection. In the end, and it's always the same every year, the quantity group always has the best photos in terms of quality. The lesson is simple. The members of the first group have learned unconsciously to improve their photos by repeating. Nothing could be truer for habits. The more we repeat, the more we improve. The third element to make an action easy is actually priming our environment. One simple strategy that I think is one of the most effective is what James Clear calls resetting. If you have to put your table away every time before you work, it makes the action impossible. You might want to think of ordering things on your table right after you're done using it. If you have to look for your socks or your shoes before going to the gym, this contributes to make the action impossible. You might want to consider putting your socks or shoes away in the same place right after use. The rule is simple. Put things back in order for the next use. The same goes the other way for habits you want to avoid. Find ways to create a lot of friction. If you want to decrease your TV time, unplug the cable after watching and put it in a drawer, for example. Your brain will start associating watching TV with the label difficult, and you know what next. In summary, to make a habit easy, no matter how difficult it might seem at the beginning, you can practice the 2 minutes rule. The next thing is repeating, for repetition is the secret. The more you repeat, the more you improve, even if you're not trying to improve. Remember the teacher's experience. Finally, use resetting. In other words, put things back in order for the next use. The fourth law, make the action satisfying. We tend to repeat habits that have paid off immediately in the past. But most of the time, good habits have their costs in the present and their rewards in the future, while bad habits have their reward in the present and their costs in the future. This is why the path to success that requires good and consistent habits over time is taken by only a few people. However, it is possible to keep good habits and get rid of bad ones by creating a small feeling of well-being immediately after a good habit, or a small pain immediately after bad habits. You can make contracts with partners. You can, for example, pay a considerable amount of money to a partner if you miss a day of training. Or you can commit to do something unpleasant after missing a habit. We can also set up tracking systems. It can be a calendar where you check off each time you make progress. Tracking habits gives you a sense that something is progressing and that you need to keep moving forward so you don't lose the gains you've made so far. Third element, never miss twice. One trap we fall usually into in our implementation of habits is the all or nothing, or what I call the perfection trap. If you were to forget everything said in this video, I think this is the only one you should keep. If you plan to run for 10 minutes every day, always remember that it is better to run for 30 seconds or walk than to stay at home. If you plan to talk to 10 prospects for your business, remember that it is better to talk to one than not to talk at all. Never forget that the identity we want to achieve, someone who does the thing, is much more important than perfection in accomplishing the task. In summary, James Clear explains for the fourth law that we should reward ourselves when we have accomplished something. We can make contracts with others, for example. Track our habits with tracking systems and never fail twice. Bad training is certainly better than no training at all. That's a summary of what I've understood about the 4 laws of habit formation from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And personally, it's the best book I've ever read and the one that's had the most impact on me. It's a lot at once, so review the chapters in the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already to be notified of my next book reviews.